Good morning, and thank you once again for allowing me to come and do this interview here with you. If you don't mind introducing yourself and then letting us know where we are this morning.
Yes, my name is Juan Garcia. I'm the Director of Programs and Operations here at Self-Help Graphics and Art, here in the city of Los Angeles.
Talk louder.
Okay. My name is Juan Garcia. I'm the Director of Programs and Operations here at Self-Help Graphics. We're here in the city of Boyle Heights, well, city of Los Angeles, in a community named Boyle Heights.
My name is Felicia Montes. I'm an artist and activist, past Self-Help Graphics staff, and also helped to do some of the program in terms of Noche de Ofrenda, which is part of Day of the Dead.
Great. Could you tell us a little bit about the history of Self-Help Graphics here in Los Angeles?
Self-Help was founded by a Franciscan nun named Sister Karen Bocalero, a group of artists that specifically, for me, is very interesting and very telling for the time that this organization was founded. It was two artists who were queer, a nun who is also have said to be queer, and then yet a group of artists who, three of which were Vietnam veterans, and then two Chicanas. So it was a interesting mix of artists for the time. And even now, if an organization were to have started by that kind of group, it'd be kind of an interesting thing. Two openly gay men artists in the Chicano community. And it was founded as a response to a lot of the social justice movements that were taking place, specifically the Chicano Moratorium and Ruben Salazar. Artists felt the need to be able to communicate their messages to the community. It was a way for getting the word out. And silk screening was that one medium that was very democratic. It was inexpensive, easy to replicate. You can set up at an action and print some posters and get them out to the community. So with that in mind, Self-Help was founded to provide those resources for those artists. To build that capacity for artists to be able to not only create their art, but engage with their community and, in the very early stages of what now is being called social practice.
And what years exactly did it get founded? We know that in terms of the type of the Chicano movement, social movements that were happening, but what was the exact date that it began?
1970, and it was incorporated in 1973.
And so some of the programming that happened at that time was definitely more social oriented. How have you seen the programming since then evolve?
It's actually come full circle, in my opinion. It went from it being very driven from the community and a lot of the issues that were taking place at the time, even identity driven. And now you have a lot of youth who are still questioning identity, even just the roles of genders. So that very much for me has come very, full circle. And it went from that to professionalizing artists and their, whether they were teaching or trying to get into museums, gallery shows. Now back to, square one, preparing artists to be able to teach the medium, but also have the capacity to do it at a very professional level.
And when did Self-Help Graphics begin to start doing programming with Dia de los Muertos?
Interestingly enough, I think in '73 when it was founded, through the Barrio Mobile Art Studio program. That program was essentially a converted UPS truck that was turned into a mobile studio. They would drive out to different parts of the community, set up and teach photography, silk screening, and other mediums as well. Through that, the artists found that a lot of the youth that they were teaching these mediums to were very disconnected from their cultural roots. So the artists, specifically Linda Vallejo and Irena Cervantes, did a lot of research as to, what would be ways to engage these little youngsters, these young artists, and make that connection and build that bridge between being a first generation, Mexican American Chicano here in the U.S. and connecting to your roots. So Day of the Dead was one of those ceremonies that hadn't been appropriated as much. I mean, even back then, Cinco de Mayo was celebrated, but it was done in a very American way. And Dia de los Muertos was very much an untouched ceremonial remembrance of our ancestors. So they started teaching Dia de los Muertos out of the Barrio Mobile Art Studio program. And then from there came the idea to do this, annual celebration of it. And it's become what what it is now, internationally. So it's kind of, it's kind of interesting. That program, the Barrio Mobile Art Studio program, also changed the way arts education was taught on a national level. So it's just kind of, for me, it's kind of a little overwhelming at times to think that program, kind of sprouted these two big things. I don't know if Felicia wants to touch on a little bit on that, because she also organized Day of the Dead for many years at Self Help Graphics.
Definitely. Felicia, could you tell us a little bit about yourself and your participation here with Self Help Graphics and Dia de los Muertos in Los Angeles?
Sure. So I grew up kind of part of and going to many cultural celebrations and marches and protests as part of the child of the Chicano and Chicana movement. But one of the important things was going to cultural centers and to celebrations. So I was part of going to Self Help Graphics from a young age and part of Day of the Dead and celebrating, but just once, the one day that they had the event, and not necessarily part of the workshops, because at that time it was, again, more for adults and professional artists or professionalizing artists. So I volunteered as a teenager, and also in college became a Getty intern at Self Help Graphics and became intern and then eventually staff to begin to celebrate and coordinate the festivals for Day of the Dead, specifically the artists, the stage, and more of the community workshops that would happen around and in preparation for the Day of the Dead on November 1st and 2nd, when Self Help Graphics would create the celebration here. So it was overall for many years been a part of creating the festival, creating spaces for community members to connect to Day of the Dead and Dia de los Muertos celebrations in the way that Self Help Graphics does it, which is creating community art workshops and a large community procession and then event and celebration, which includes all forms of art. Of course, Self Help Graphics is very focused and is a visual art organization, but has always been a space for other multimedia arts to have a space on the stage or in exhibit or performance, poetry, really because they were a cultural center, even though focused on visual arts, there's always been a space for poetry, performance, music, and dance in the space. So that is really what comes out in the large celebration. That's the annual, and we'll be celebrating the 42nd annual this year, November 2015.
I know that you all have done quite a bit of educational programming as well, related around Dia de los Muertos. Could you speak a little bit to that type of envisioning and programming, the educational efforts that are done here out of Self Help Graphics?
Every October, for as far as I know, every October that the organization has celebrated Dia de los Muertos, have facilitated a series of workshops called the Community Art Workshops. So about 200 to 300 folks come in on a Saturday, learn how to do papel picado, learn how to do paper flowers, paper mache masks. So it's also a way for somebody, a young artist who has probably never participated in these type of activities, to come in and learn. And now we've started to go out and do them in the parks. So it's not only the folks that know about self-help graphics, but it becomes an area for folks to be introduced to self-help graphics. And we've been doing that for the last 2 years, and it's been very, for me, it's going back to the purpose of self-help graphics. It's one thing for folks to come to our site, and it's another thing for us to go to their community and take this to them, and in their space be able to teach these mediums and teach the history and also the cultural significance. So they learn it from a very pure form versus the corporate or the American marketed form of Dia de los Muertos now, which you can go and buy it at Target or you can go buy it at Walmart. So here they get to make everything that they're going to decorate their altar with.
You bring up some really good points in terms of, I'm thinking about when we think about accessibility of when community being able to get to particular cultural centers or institutions, right, that supposedly host our culture, and I think it's a really great investment of these centers as yourselves going to the community. Could you tell us what specific neighborhoods or cities and demographics that you are working with. I think that would be really great to know.
In the past year, we had like a mini residency at the Natural History Museum for their Grandes Maestros exhibition. The Grandes Maestros exhibition was works that most folks would consider, crafts or artesanía, but now they were shown in a museum setting, which is great. But it was important for us to be there to provide programming to let folks know that, yeah, it's fine to see it in a museum, but you can also make this yourself. And it doesn't take, a highly skilled artist or what someone would consider a fine artist to be able to create work that can be shown in a museum.
And these were community members here of Los Angeles, or?
Yes, and it was the museum is in South Los Angeles, so it's also a good way to connect with folks from other communities. We also partnered up with the Pomona Fairplex, which is about 45 minutes from here. Did 6 similar workshops out there. And the Pomona Fair, it's like a catch-all of, everybody in LA, all demographics, different backgrounds, different income levels. Here in Boyle Heights, we've basically gone around the city, West LA, Northeast LA. So the mobile program really allows us to not just be servicing folks here in Boyle Heights or East LA, but really the entire county.
No, that's really great. I do want to make sure that we get to the types of practices of traditions and the transitions that we've seen here in Los Angeles. If you can speak maybe just 1 minute worth about that, and then if you don't mind, Felicia, telling us a little bit about that.
Sure. So Juan mentioned a little bit about how you can also get items and learn about Day of the Dead, online or at the stores, and be able to get things at like Party City now in terms that have maybe the calaca or the calavera. So over the years, because of the high interest in it and the imagery that is really calls to a lot of people, and specifically artists and interested, it has become commodified in many ways and commercialized, and even the celebrations have at many times. So it's really important to self-help graphics to stay true to the roots and have a community celebration, but also suggest to all members who come and all audience members to also have that time and that private time at their home to celebrate and to honor it. So there's been various transitions in terms of how people celebrate inside their home or outside in the public in community celebrations, but also how people do it in terms of the items, and talking about commercialization and appropriation and those questions, even within our own circles of Chicana and Chicano Mexicano artists are speaking about that. And it's not something that we have answered yet, but it's a dialogue that is very, very important to speak about and to share with others.
Great, thank you so much.
Yes.